and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the What Now Show. I am your host, Suryansh Vasumalik, and we are joined by George Hickman. He is the head coach of the Muay Thai program at one of the most popular and one of the most successful gyms in the MMA scene at the moment, Tiger Muay Thai. He himself has bagged quite a few different accolades himself. He's a three-time wrestling state champion. He's a four-time finalist in the USA, uh, and he is was in the top 20 in the US, so in the national ranking. George, it's a pleasure to have you. How are you doing?
I'm good, bro. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, amazing. It's a pleasure to have you, man. So, I want to first get started with what you do as the coach in the gym itself, right? So, I'm sure you've worked with a lot of different talents of different levels, from champions to people who are just starting out, right? So, when you take your approach towards developing these fighters from the rookies to the people higher up in the ranks, how do you decide to what is easier for you, helping the people who are already inexperienced, or helping the people who are already skilled develop what they already have?
Well, it's a bit different at our gym because most of the fighters, 90% or more are from 99% of the MMA fighters are from, from other countries.
Right.
Because the gym, obviously being in Thailand, people can't live there really too much full time, or they have to have the proper visas and stuff. So, as the head MMA coach, I coach fighters, and we have classes that are specifically designed for professional fighters, and then I also teach normal people, kind of like the same schedule, but it's a completely different class. So whether they're an amateur or whether they are, someone that's never competed in MMA, however they enjoy training, or we have people that have never trained MMA before that come and take our classes. So normally it's a little bit different now in COVID times, but pre-COVID times, I um, I would normally, my brother and I would teach a class in the morning time, which we just call it like the beginners MMA class, and then it'll be the same class but in the afternoon. Obviously, it's completely different because they're professional fighters. So typically, I'll coach beginners in the morning and then the fighters in the afternoon, and kind of in between that, I teach privates and help other people and stuff.
Right. So when you let's go back to when you actually made the move to this gym, right? So of course, before, as we know, you were in the US. You were big on wrestling, and then you became a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt as well. A purple belt. My
I'm,
apologies.
yeah, I'm not a black belt. Maybe one day, but not yet.
Purple belt. My apologies. But that's still impressive in its own right. You made the move from the United States to Thailand, training now at Tiger. So, when did you decide? When were you introduced to the environment at Tiger Muay Thai, and how did you make the move there?
Um, it was pretty simple. I saw that they were having tryouts online, to be a part of the MMA team, and I had some friends that had been there before, and contacted them, and they kind of helped me get there. And I put an application in, and I went there in 2014, and I did the tryout process, and you know, got a scholarship. And it wasn't long after that, you know, probably in the first 8 months or so, I would say. One of the former coaches was leaving, and became the wrestling coach and the assistant MMA coach. But I was still fighting competitively,
Mm.
and probably it's been 4 years now, 5 years now since my last fight. Can't remember exactly when it was, but eventually I just, I really enjoyed. I loved fighting, um, but the workload of one one coach at that time, I kind of took a back seat, and I didn't have plans to stop fighting, but it just kind of turned out that way, and I just focused more on like the team and stuff, and yeah, that's how I got there and started coaching.
Amazing. I still remember that last fight back in Phoenix FC. I think it was against Matt Styles. You had the decision victory over that. It was I think it was in late 2016ish. It was
Yeah,
again,
I think you might be right. Yeah,
yeah.
it's been a while, that's for sure.
So, I mean, before I go move on to what's next, do you have any plans of strapping up the gloves again, or do you want to stay as a coach?
No, no, I always joke now I'm an old man. I don't, it takes fighting is a selfish sport, and to be successful at it, and it takes a lot of time. And sometimes, when I'm training with the younger guys, I think to myself, I could still do it, but I always crush that thought quite quickly, because it takes a lot, it takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to be successful at it. Because if I was going to do it, I wouldn't want to do it halfway. I would want to do it the whole way. But man, I'm 35 now. I'm getting older, and those days are behind me. It's still for my ego. It's nice to get in there and like mix it up with the fighters and stuff. But I have no desire to do that, to put my body through that, and put all the effort that it really takes to to be successful at it.
Right. So when moving back to when you made the transition to Thailand, was getting acclimatized to the new environment, new people, a bit of a language barrier, the whole process of settling into a new place and everything, was that a bit difficult, or was it a bit easy to sink into?
No, it was for me. It was very easy. I've always been like kind of uh, adventurous, I guess you could say. Like moving away from home and things like that has never been an issue for me. So it was something that I was going to get to do, that I enjoyed and I love to do. So I had a Muay Thai coach in the States, Manu. He's one of the better foreign Muay Thai fighters from like the golden era in the '90s.
Mhm.
Um, so I knew I had never been to Thailand, but I knew a lot about, I guess, not a lot, but I knew a little bit about Thailand, I should say. And I used to have Thai friends in Atlanta where I lived, and um, I had a Thai girlfriend for a bit, so it was quite like when I went there, it was obviously I was a bit nervous and things because it was completely new, and I had never really been outside of the country. I was like a lot of Americans, so but I knew within the first 2 weeks, like I just fell in love with the place, and I didn't want to leave.
Right. So what do you like best about, this whole move to Thailand, or is there any part of the states that you still miss, or uh,
Yeah, uh, yeah. I mean, there's things about the states that I miss. Sometimes the food and the good beer and things like that. But and obviously my family. My family's still there, and I don't go home too often. But living in Thailand is just it's a tropical place. I like warm weather, and it's always hot. It's beautiful. You can go anywhere in Thailand, and there's some type of beauty to see. Um, and it's just I'm a very laid back person. I'm not very high strung, and it's a very, like, obviously, training is very serious and things like that. But outside of my job and what I do, and coaching, it's just very laid back. I get to get on a motorbike and drive to work. Like a mile and a half to work on a motorbike, and it's nice weather. And if I want to go to the beach is 10 minutes away from me by motorbike. So it's a very different lifestyle from what I'm used to in the States, where especially for MMA, there's most places, I would say, in America for MMA, there's you have to drive to one gym for one thing and go to another gym for another thing, and it makes everything a lot easier having it all under one roof, and just it's paradise. So yeah, I enjoy it.
Interesting. So let's talk about, training, like training different fighters in Tiger, right? So of course, because there's a lot of high level talent, was there ever any levels of because you're the head coach at the time as well, so you'd have your own kinds of drills and different training routines to run with the fighters. So has there ever been any kind of clash between the fighters and the coaching staff, which the fighters want to do something, the coaches want to do something else, and there's a bit of a clash there.
Uh, Not really, no. I mean, I'm the coach, and my brother's the coach, and Alex Shode is the BJJ coach. So, kind of what we say is what goes. Otherwise, we wouldn't be the coach. But it definitely, it's a very different gym. Like I said before, it's you know, 99% of the people that we come in contact and we train and coach are from other countries. So they're not fighters that are, there the whole year. We have a few people that are like that stay year round, but most of the fighters come and go and come back and do their camps with us and things like that. So it's very different. And obviously every fighter is, it's Tiger has so much to offer. There's BJJ, there's Muay Thai, there's MMA, there's kickboxing, there's Krabi Kabong, like sword fighting and stuff. So there's everything that you can do. But most of the and I don't coach like anyone that comes to train there that's in one of our MMA classes. I coach them. However, most of them go back to their home countries before fights, and they have their own coaches. So I don't coach everyone. I coach them in the class, but only particular fighters do. Myself and the other coaching staff do we work with one on one all the time and go to corner them and things like that.
Right, right. So when it comes to training in different areas, and of course, I mean you coach in different aspects of the art. But if you were ever to choose like one specific area, like kickboxing or wrestling or jiu-jitsu that you'd prefer training wholeheartedly, which one would you prefer, or which one would you go after?
For myself personally, or
Yeah,
for when I'm training
personally.
fighters? Oh, well, I'm old now. Like wrestling was my first love, and I love wrestling. But it's like I still wrestle occasionally. But for me personally, training, I think I prefer to train BJJ now because it's a lot easier on my body and it doesn't hurt as much.
Right. So, of course, there's a lot of as we spoke about, there's a lot of different people coming in from different areas, and of course, you've also traveled yourself to back to quarantine situations in different countries, being a part of different fight camps, and being in the corner. So, when you're making these transitions into these different hotels, keeping staying with the fighter, the nerves leading up to the fight, when how are these entire processes like you had you have those 2 week quarantines with the UFCs and so on and so forth. What's it like dealing with these different quarantine rules and so on and so forth?
It's a very different time uh, last year. So normally, like every month for the most part, in pre-COVID, there were some months where I didn't have to travel, but most every month I would be traveling, somewhere, whether it was to another country like in America or in Europe, or whether it was somewhere in Asia for like a one championship event, or sometimes it'd be in Bangkok for just like a smaller Thailand show. But most months, at least 1 week out of the month, I would be traveling. Um, in 2020, I traveled in January and February, and then after the New Zealand event in February, I was supposed to go to America for a UFC event, and that was canceled at the end of March, I believe. And then from March until like I think it was August or September, I didn't go anywhere, obviously because of the pandemic. And then I think I came to Bangkok 2 weeks. And then October of last year was the first time that I traveled to another country outside of Thailand. And that was for one of the like first fight islands when I had Loma, the Thai girl, fighting on that.
Right.
And then I went
Fazeev, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and then first for Loma in October, and then I went with Faziev at UFC 256, I believe,
Yeah.
which was in December. So yeah, those were the only two times that I left the country, and now I'm in quarantine again in Bangkok. I just got back from the most recent UFC
Yeah.
257. So it's 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 been a very strange time. It's before it was great because I could go out and go somewhere else for a week. 7 8 days for the UFC events, and then come back and get back onto work. But now it's whenever I go out, I have to come back and quarantine for 2 weeks, which it makes it rough, like having a family and stuff like that. So it's definitely a bit different.
Right, understandably so. So, when you're cornering rookies, and when you're cornering experienced people, in between rounds, like let's say between the difference between people who've trained the art for a long, long time, they've been coaches like Fazeev, and you have many other fighters who aren't as experienced in being in the fight, and don't have enough ring time to be as experienced and can control the nerves as much. What is the biggest difference you see among these fighters when it comes to being able to adjust to different situations in the ring, octagon, or wherever they are performing?
Uh, I think with the more ring time that the fighters get, and the more time that they spend in there, the more comfortable they're going to be in the heat of the moment, and they're going to be able to make better decisions while they're in there. Whereas I think that's one of the biggest things. Whereas people that are not as experienced, especially like newer people that are like maybe amateurs or something like that, uh, just having the ring time and being comfortable in those situations, sometimes they may not make the proper decision that they should make. Whereas when you've been in there many times, and even fighters that come from Muay Thai or kickboxing with a lot of fights and transfer to MMA, they still have that experience, and that experience goes a long ways in making critical decisions, because it's not like it's very different from Muay Thai or kickboxing where it's only one aspect and it's just a striking. uh, MMA is like chaos, for the whole time, the duration of the bout, and you learn, I think, over time with experience, how to make calculated decisions and things like that. Because one small mistake can be detrimental.
Right. So when let's compare it, well, when you compare it to how you were, like when you were fighting, when you had the gloves on and were in the ring. You've had some of these amazing performances where you've had, your rear naked chokes in the round one against Stephen Upchurch, and you've had these close slobber knockers, even in your last fight with the decision. So when you're trying to, figure out your opponent a little bit, if I may, or figuring out your range, how you should try to approach your opponent depending on how they're coming after you, when you're figuring out these different opponents, what are like the key things that you look for as a fighter? What are the key things that you try to do to get around to either the wrestling, or try to outstrike them in between rounds when you were thinking of what to do next? Were you listening to your coaches, or were you just planning it out yourself? What was that whole process like?
As a fighter, I think it's very, especially in this sport, because there are so many different facets of MMA, whether it's grappling or takedowns or against the fence or striking. Everyone, people in this time now, people are really becoming well-rounded, more so ever, and the sport is always evolving. But when I was a fighter, yeah, I always tried to listen to my coaches and have somewhat of a game plan before I went in there. And I think that that's, as a coach now, it's my job and my duty to, to be well prepared. I need to be well prepared, and knowing what, you know, try to anticipate what the other fighter is going to do, and look out for habits and patterns and things like that, and try to be very acquainted, and then try to put that into whatever fighter I have that is going up against that opponent, and
Right.
a way that they can understand it and process it.
Right. So let's move on to some of these big fights that are coming up with some of the Tiger guys. So you have Peter Yan going up against Aljo later this year. So when you look at, I'm sure you've already spoken about like Yan, about the camp and being going into training, right? So when you look at how the style of someone like Jan and how it matches up with Aljo, how do you think the performance? I mean, of course, I know I mean, I assume you don't want to give up anything as a game plan towards Aljo, but what do you make of this whole the matchup between these two guys, and how do you see it going?
Uh, well, I'm not Peter's head coach. Like when Peter comes to Tiger, of course, I help him sometimes in training, but actually, John Boy, who's one of the boxing coaches at Tiger, he was just with me as well in Abu Dhabi for Khalil's fight, helping me
Yeah.
with him. He's his head coach, I would say, for MMA, and he's actually now he flew back. When I came back to Thailand, he flew to Miami to link up with Peter because of the travel restrictions and things like that. It just wasn't really feasible for Peter to get to Thailand and stuff. So he went to instead to train in America. So John Boy's with him now, working on what they have for the fight as far as the game plan and things. But of course, I'm very confident in Peter's ability. Like what people see when he has fought in the UFC so far is not even half of what he's capable of. Um,
Mhm.
he's he's very good everywhere, and I don't think there's a lot of people saying that he's not and that whatnot, but people haven't seen what he's really capable of. So I'm very confident in wherever the fight may go. I'm very confident in Peter.
Yeah, because what scared me the most about someone like Peter was, when watching some of his fights, he has a ridiculous amount of power in his hands. Because you've seen how he's been dominant in his wrestling. You've seen his clinch game's been pretty impressive. But if you ask me, I think Peter's sheer strength, it's just dominating. Because he touches you and you're pretty much getting chicken legs and you're either knocked down. So it really intrigues me about how different fighters take their approach, either to go swing for the fences or to break them apart punch by punch, kick by kick. So when which brings me to my next question, right? So when you have these powerhouses like Jan, or you have these different technical strikers. I think Alex Volkanovski also comes over to Tiger once in a while, to train himself for his camps. So you have multiple different fighters coming in, right? So when you're trying to help develop these powerhouses, and at the same time these technical strikers who pick away and eventually get the killing blow, how do you try to draw up their routines in that way? Do you try to set them up to set up these swing for the fences strikes, or do you try to use those strengths to their advantage, or do you try developing the other areas as well?
Uh, well, I'm not, like I said, I'm not Peter's coach or Alex's coach.
Yeah.
Actually, Alex and I used to be teammates. My brother helps him a lot with wrestling and goes
Mhm.
with him and coaches him for wrestling and goes to his fights. But Alex is, he's, him and Peter are completely different fighters, but they both have very, very high fight IQs. Peter
Yeah.
is more of a pressure fighter, but he has very good defense and he has a very good fight IQ. And Volkanovski is very skillful, very crafty. Um, he controls distance very well, and again, he's a very high IQ fighter. But I don't make either one of their schedules, but they both it's pretty. I mean, basic. That they train everything all the time. They're constantly improving, whether it's striking or grappling or wrestling or cage work. It doesn't matter. They train everything. There's not really like they're just focused on one thing, and
Mm.
leaving the other things kind of out to dry. They're professionals, man. They train
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So, you mentioned your brother, which brings me to what I wanted to bring up next. You, of course, training with a sibling and training with a relative is one of the rare things you see every now and then. So, when you're training different people alongside your brother, uh, does that make it anything, give you any little more satisfaction as a coach that, you're getting to train alongside someone you've grown up with, or, is there any special element to it?
Yeah, for sure. My brother and I grew up wrestling our whole life and together. And I was, I think, 3.5 years older than him, but we had a wrestling mat in our house, and we had a lot of battles in that room. And we went to the same university and wrestled at the same university. And uh, when I was a senior, he was a freshman, and that was probably my most successful year wrestling wise in college, and probably the most fun I had as well. And it's the same thing, I think my brother's been at Tiger now for 3 or 4 years. I can't remember exactly. But since he came there, it's made me better as a coach and as a person. And it's great to have, like, because he's my only real family member outside of my wife and child. And
Yeah.
Thailand, it makes everything better and much easier to be away from home because it is like home. Um, Not to say that we don't have our clashes sometimes, but it's my little brother, so it'll always be like that. But yeah, no, it makes a huge difference, and just being able to have him, to be able to feed off of the energy that of each other and know each other so well. I think it makes both of us better coaches, and we're getting to live the dream and travel the world together. So it's pretty cool.
Well, you mentioned clashes with him, right? And you had multiple rounds in the wrestling rooms. So when you were in college or when you were, growing up, who won most of these altercations? Was it you? Was it him?
I would say pretty much, and I won everyone until about I remember in my senior year of college when he started to kind of close the gap on me, and then when I graduated and came back and wrestled with him, I think he started getting the better of me. And then before he even ever started coaching at Tiger, after the first year that I lived there, he came for like a month to visit on vacation, and we wrestled, and he just pummeled me. And then since then, after that, like wrestling wise, it's not good for me. And now he's learning how to, now he's learned BJJ, and things are changing. So uh, I have to watch myself.
So do you all get into a spar, or do you throw in some rounds together once in a while?
Well, occasionally, recently we've done in the last couple of months we've trained BJJ together a little bit, and I think the last time that we trained together, he I think submitted me, and we like when we it's fun whenever we do stuff because we just talk shit to each other the whole time. So like half the time I'm laughing or he's laughing at something I do or he does or one of us says. So it's a good time.
Yeah, it must be quite interesting doing that. So, when you're balancing, of course, a lot of your time must go into, helping develop these fighters and, helping them succeed. So, when you see a fighter succeed, and does that give you a greater sense of success? You were able to be a part of that, or whenever you see that happen, you just okay, right, this one and on to the next one. Like, when you're seeing these fighters develop from one stage to another, what are your thoughts, watching multiple different fighters develop on so many different levels?
Yeah, it's gratifying for sure. But I'm doing it to help them to pass whatever knowledge I can to help elevate them and help them further along in their career, which in turn is going to help them in their life. But um, every fighter that I that I'm coaching and that I'm really coaching, that I'm, if I'm coaching, when I say coaching, I mean like coaching them before the fight, cornering them in the fight. Um, I put everything, I have into it because whether they win or they lose, the same thing is coming back to me. It's like me signing my name off on every person that gets in that ring. So if they win, I win, and if they lose, I lose. And it's a very it's a sport, but it's a very unforgiving. It's the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows, and people don't really understand, truly the sacrifice and things that go into it. And yes, it's a sport, but it's not this person wins, this person loses. It's this person wins and gets this amount of money, and this person loses and they didn't get the full amount of money that they should have gotten. And so it's not a game. It's very serious, and yeah, it's every person that that I train, I put everything into it because they win, I win, they lose, I lose. And I just want to, obviously I want to help them become a better person and help them with their career. But it's this is 99% of the people that do it at this level, it is their profession, so it's like if some type of job that you may have and you go in and you maybe do something not exactly right, and the boss just normally the boss will just whatever it may be, reprimand you in some way. But
You have
and
to help them develop. Yeah.
yeah, in the fight game, it is very different and it's very serious. So yeah.
So is it a bit hard when, let's say for example, one of your fighters, how they fight, and on maybe on that particular night they weren't able to perform to that level, and judging by their abilities that you've seen in the gym, they weren't able to perform as well in the bright lights. When something like this does happen, does that agitate you to an extent? Do you get a little frustrated because he's capable of it, or do you tell them to to brush it off, understand where he went wrong, and try to move forward from there? Or what kind of an approach do you take?
I, every as a coach, you I think at least I think that you have to speak to everyone different. This if you got 20 people on a team, for example, you have 20 different sets of problems and 20 different personalities that you have to deal with. And each person, I have to speak to them and address them differently than the next. So you have to really, it's a very intimate thing. And so you really have to know the person that you're with. But yeah, if someone doesn't perform to what you think is their optimum potential, then it can be a bit frustrating for sure. But just by them getting in there, like if someone gets in that ring and gives, I know that they gave it their all, but maybe it didn't go their way or whatnot. As long as they fought their hardest, then I have no, I can't be mad at that for too long. But of course, it's gonna annoy me, not annoy, but it's gonna I'm gonna speak to that person and this is what we did wrong. You can't make these mistakes. This is what we have to do right. But if someone were to quit, then I would have a very serious issue with that. But that doesn't happen all that often, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, very good thing indeed. So, when you're in the training room, so let's talk about, your personality is in the training room itself, right? Are you a little demanding with your own self-analysis? Do you see yourself as a bit more demanding of the fighters? You want to get the best out of them, push them and, throw them as far as they can to push them to their limits, or do you try to take a bit of an easier approach on them? How do you gauge, of course, different fighters, different ways of approaching them? But at an average, what do you try to do it at most?
Uh, yeah, I demand hard work is what I demand. I demand hard work, and uh, but I approach everyone differently because the way that I talk to one person, and if I yell at one person, they may crumble to that. But if I speak to another person, too soft, that might not hit home. Whereas I need to be yelling at them or speaking to them stern. I don't do a lot of like, I don't yell at fighters out of anger, really. That's not my thing. But yeah, I would just say, speaking to them a specific way, depending on the fighter. But I demand everyone to work hard and things like that. But yeah, it's you have to approach them differently because how you speak to them and what you get out, or can be a bit tricky.
Right. So that being said, coming towards the end of this, are there any, of course, you have a lot of talent budding in that gym. So, are there any other upcoming names that you want to throw out, for the people to keep a lookout for that, are on the rise, and, you got to hop on the train quickly.
Uh, yeah, I mean, we have a lot of up and coming fighters. Not to I don't want to name any specifically, but there's a lot of people that are up and comers, whether they're foreigners, and we have a few ties that are up and comers. So just be on the lookout. The gym is continually, there's a lot of hard work that not only the fighters put in, but the rest of the coaching staff around me puts in. So I think we're not just myself again, the whole coaching staff. We're trying to build something good over there.
So when you provide, of course, you have different fighters coming with their own with their own own coaches as well. Coming over to your atmosphere, and using your area. So when you're trying to work with so many different coaching staffs of so many different people, does it get a little hard to communicate from this group to that group, from that group to this group? Is it a little hard to handle different groups there, or does it just flow easily?
No. So as far as like the coaching staff is, myself, my brother, um, John Boy, who's the boxing coach, another coach that coaches boxing, Sam, um, and and Alex, the BJJ coach. It's pretty easy because we're all on the same page. And when I say other fighters have other coaches, like they come to train at our gym, but their coaches don't get involved. If they most of the time they don't bring their coaches. Occasionally they do, and some of those coaches I have relationships with, and then other ones, I have no idea who they are, but they don't ever get involved in our training sessions. And that's that fighter's coach. So like I'll help him in the class if he's doing something wrong or she's doing something wrong that we've showed them. But I don't get involved, with that. They take our class and maybe they train on their own. But most of the fighters that come to the gym, they don't actually bring coaches with them.
Right. All right, very interesting. So, this is all I had from my side, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and it's been very insightful because, a lot of when you're talking a lot about when you're hearing many of these fighters, talking about, uh, you know. Yeah, I train at Tiger. I do my camps at Tiger. We've heard a lot about people going to Tiger, but by talking to you, I've understood that when the with the, the environment that you talk about, the way you'll deal with these different fighters, and the different classes that you're working with, how expansive, from Brazilian jiu-jitsu to sword fighting. I understand why so many different people would want to train there. So it was a pleasure talking to you. And before we end, what we usually do here is leave the last few minutes to the guests. If there's anything else you want to say, anyone you want to thank, anything you want to say, all you whatever you want to do, man.
No, I appreciate taking the time to have me on, and you did a very good job asking questions. Some of those questions I had to think about, but no, I appreciate it, and anyone watching, continue to support our gym and our fighters.
Support they will indeed. Thank you so much for joining in, George Hickman. Thank you all for watching. This was another episode of the What Now Show. Feel free to follow George's Instagram and his other socials. We'll mention it in the description below. We'll mention Tiger's links as well. Make sure you keep an eye out for the fighters coming in. On their website they have a news and blog where you get day-to-day news on their different fighters and what's coming up. So do keep a lookout for that. Once again, thank you very much for joining in, George. And that's what that was. And we'll see you on the next one.